Welcome to another episode of Be Free and Clear. And today we are going to cover a topic that I know drives me and at times has even kept me up at nights. It's the whole concept of thinking about the things we really want, the deep desires that kind of come to us and surface out of nowhere. But yet when we think about the direction that we're going to go in or what we need to do in order to reach those desires, we start to feel lost or even stuck. And my friend that I have with us today is Brian Johnson, the owner of ThriveWithMoney.com. Brian is a financial coach, and he's going to share with us his wisdom, his strategies, his systems and framework that's going to allow us to look at those desires to be able to create the financial life that you always wanted. And yes, I just had to look at that, and because I that's Brian's tagline, so I took it from him. I injected that into our show today. So Brian, thank you for sharing your beautiful tagline. I love it. I think it works phenomenally well with the whole concept of being free and clear.
Absolutely. Thanks, Johnny. I'm really glad to be here. And just to tie into that a little bit, I think one of the great tragedies that I see in the world, at least as I talk to people about money, is just that so many people, they're doing okay. Maybe they're comfortable, but they have this like gnawing sense that just, man, I should be doing something more. Or there should be more out there. Or my money should be doing more. Or it should feel different. Or right. And so being able to say, if you're sensing like sort of that gnawing feeling, like how do you actually change the trajectory of where you're at and bring it into so you do have that financial life that you've always wanted, that place where generosity is flowing and abundance is flowing, and you're able to make the impact and have the peace that you want to experience in your life. So it's such a, I think it's such a powerful thing, I believe.
You use the word gnaw, and it is funny because that I know in my life over my course of learning and growing and experiencing just life. That's certainly feeling like that. It's a gnawing, and it's also interesting. I talk about in Be Free and Clear. There's a section where I talk about get your Bible out or get your Bible out, get your dictionary out, because we're going to look up the definition of words. And if we use that, we look up the definition of comfort. Or if I think about comfort, are we really comfortable or are we content? Do we get into that space of really not? We say, oh, I'm comfortable, so I'm not going to move. But it's really contentment, because if we were comfortable, we would be accomplishing and growing and expanding and going after our desires. So I'm interjecting like kind of some of those thoughts of like, let's try to break the chains of contentment today with your systems, and tie them in together with the Be Free and Clear framework as well, so people and start moving forward. Before we do that, though, Brian, you've got a great story. Like, I want people to hear about like the magic that kind of got created with you when we first met. I think it was a little over a year ago, or maybe coming up on a year ago, and kind of how the things evolved from you at that standpoint. Do you want to share a little bit of that background? Because I think this is gold for just to hear your story about how the universe lines up for you, man, whether you want them to or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll just walk you back through it sometime. So, I've always said it was in this space where like I had this day job where I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing to make money. This is sort of the fundraising arm, and this is the passion. So for many years, that was being the volunteer director of men's ministry at a church. But I'd always wrestle with like, how do I find a spot to like sort of line these things up where I can make money in a spot that I'm really passionate about? And it led me back to this a passion from my youth of like money and how could I help people around money? And I'd been on this path, so I'd been building Thrive with Money. It'd been a side business for 4.5 years while I was still working the day job, and just sort of slow learning, building, creating frameworks, developing my own stuff. And then all of a sudden, like you said, there was a large synchronicity that happened. I had come out of the conference that you and I had both attended at the end of March, and I thought, man, my business is just going to take off. And instead, all of a sudden, I was doing all this like deep work, and it felt like I was having to sort of learn some lessons over again and wrestling. And then I was like, man, what's going on here, Lord? Like, why is this taking place? And it was the Tuesday after Easter when all of a sudden I walked in the office and my name came up as one of the 50 salaried employees that they were waving goodbye to that day. Completely out of the blue, completely unexpected. But it was also this beautiful moment that as I drove away, obviously shocked because it was just completely out of the blue, but also being like almost the very first thought was like, okay, this is what I've been prepared for. And it was that really provided the launching pad for me to be able to step out and dive into doing this business full time, like I have been here for the last many months, and just being able to step forward into that future. And it's interesting too, as you look back, even though I talk to people about money, you know, one of the strange things about money is there's a lot of people out there who will tell you a certain way to do it, but they don't actually live it out, right? Like if you look behind the curtains.
Yep. Yeah.
And so for me, it's interesting, like all the things that I had been learning and coaching and training people on really ended up being the things that allowed me to make that jump and make that shift. You know, one of the things that I talk to people about is, hey, we want to create a secure money fortress. Like we want to be able to live from a position of financial strength. So we're not flipping into like this fight or flight space, but we're actually able to have resiliency to maneuver and to deal with things. And so it was for us, it was being able what that looked like is that we had been building that. And so, for example, we a couple of years before all this happened, we had paid off our house just because we wanted to live from a position of financial strength, right? It's living out that practice of that. And we had our 3 kids are all in college right now, and positioned them not because mom and dad are rich, but helping them. I have a little method that I use called the college lasagna to help people get through college debt free. And anyway, they're all in position to go through debt free. And right, so there's all these pieces that we've been sort of stacking in that suddenly when this big transition happened, we actually had the availability and the flexibility to actually walk into it without having this crazy amount of pressure of, oh, I have to go like ramp up triple the business right now, you know? So yeah, so for me, this idea of creating the financial life you want isn't just a hypothetical. For me, it's a part of what I coach and teach is absolutely from my own journey of being able to see just the power of doing some of these things and putting them in place so that then you do have options in your life when some curveballs come and divine guidance comes and shoves you out of the nest. You know, I always had I guess the piece I had a 5-year plan of when I was going to exit my day job and go full time. I was 1 year into that literally when all this transpired. So it was just sort of like, God came along and was like, nope, boop, time to go. Here we go. So yeah.
I love it. There's so much there. I think there's a combination of, number one, you said it, you are living what you're teaching, right? And I get that. And actually, it was like kind of one of my hesitations in launching Be Free and Clear. Is like, okay, am I putting out a program that sounds like all the other mumbo jumbo out there of like, go drive a Lamborghini and quit your job tomorrow and you'll make millions in 30 days, or is it going to be the authentic me? And so that's why but when I come out and tell my story, it's like, I've had business losses and setbacks, and so you being authentic and vulnerable and genuine in your story is perfect, because it's just like this is what the world needs, is more real people saying like, crap hits the fan sometimes, man. And it's like, this is what happens. But you're sharing your story of like, hey, we were already doing some work ahead of time that didn't change the fact that stuff happens. But when it does, both from a financial standpoint, I'm assuming from a health and wellness standpoint, that you made it through well, and sharing that, I think hopefully provides evidence and inspiration to people like that like this is the real stuff that goes on in people's life, but you can do something with it. So thank you for sharing that, Brian. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So gosh, where do we go from here? Because there's like so much. I don't like.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I would actually like to just, if I could, share just a little bit more of my story, going back a little bit further in time.
Let's do it. Yes.
Because you just talked about being real, and that's actually one of the things that I always talk to people. Like the first time I meet people, like one of the phrases that I use is, I just want this to be a space where we can talk about real life and money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like for you, but like so much of my life, there wasn't just space where we could just come in and ask real questions.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you tended to hear, but when we tend to hear when people are doing great with money, you know, I got this big bonus, I bought this, or when people are doing really bad, but there isn't a lot of this like, hey, I'm wrestling with this and I'm trying to figure this out. And so I guess just playing off of that, you know, for us, like, how did I get into this work of financials in the financial coaching, financial services arena? It came out of our own story. Like I was an engineer originally. And like I said, we had the 3 kids and fixer upper house and up and down in the economy. And suddenly what we were doing with money that used to be easy suddenly got really hard. And we were trying to figure it out. And, you know, we got into this space where for 7 years, it went like this. It was like, hey, this is the year something's going to change. And we're like, we're working really hard. We're doing everything that we know how to do. And we're living pretty frugal. So it's got to work. It's got to work. There's got to be a breakthrough. But instead, we just kept going round and round and round on this hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this will be the year that we figure out this magic thing that's gonna change our lives, and we're gonna do it. And every year we just kept repeating round and round and round. And it wasn't like we were drowning or in a bad spot. But going back to that gnawing thing, right? It was just like you could feel like we're not doing the things that we were put on this earth to do or we're not positioning ourselves financially to be able to do the things that we were put on this earth to do. And so that for me is actually it was the impetus of getting into this arena of saying, okay, well, how do we then create breakthroughs? Like, how do we get off this hamster wheel and instead start creating momentum and start creating a way to actually drive ourselves to the things that really matter? And so that's how I got into this space, is like you said, it coming out of lived experience of being like, I'm a smart guy. I have multiple degrees. I should know how to do all this stuff. And yet you can check so many boxes and still have this financial box that has a question mark in it of like, okay, something just isn't quite right here. It's not that it's all bad, but just something isn't right. Something isn't fitting together. I don't have the full piece or the full system working for us so that we actually have momentum.
Brian, you just hit on 5 different topics. I don't even know where to go next with it, because you said things like the financial hamster wheel, which I used to call it the financial gerbil wheel. So that is I think so many people feel that same way. Like, man, I'm doing all the right things. I've read the books, I've listened to the podcast, but as soon as I do this, something else turns up, and all of a sudden I'm going back over it again. I think that's a big part of it. And I also feel like you started to dive into something that kind of felt like what goes on inside. It's the story we're telling ourselves in our head, because you talked about money being real, but also we all have this story around money, right? I'm not good enough to receive it, or money's hard to make, or I'll never have enough. There's these stories, and now I don't know where to go with the show. Well, so many key things. So why don't you do this? So take one of those topics, if we can, inside your framework, and let's expand on a little bit, because I'm already I hope our listeners are feeling this way, that man, we're talking real life stuff, 2 dads sitting here sharing stories about where they've been at. It hasn't been easy, and so many people want the instant gratification, the dopamine hit off of social media. Oh, I want the make money, get rich quick, invest in crypto, or today it's silver, right? All these things, and really there's a methodology. If we step back from it and we give ourselves some space, there's a methodology. So, and let's do that. Let's go in that direction. Does that sound all right?
That sounds fantastic. So let's, I guess, going back to that right, the hamster wheel, the gerbil wheel, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Is why, and even what you were saying about the stories that we're telling us, to me, those go right hand in hand with each other.
Yep.
Because why do we stay stuck? And the spot that I came back to, and the thing that I really hone in on as I work with people, is that it's not that we need to learn the latest tip or hack or cheat code or whatever it is around money, because that's what I felt like I was looking for, right? I was in this space, I was like, what's that thing that there's got to be something, right, that will just come in and solve it all. But what I didn't know at the time was that what I really needed to change how I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to dive down into saying, like, how it's actually how I'm thinking about my money that's keeping me stuck where I am. And even though I grew up very frugal and adopted all those things, what I learned is that there's a difference between being frugal and being free. And there's a difference between frugalness and having a system for your money that actually just it works no matter what's going on in life, whether it's like you're saying, whether we're getting these big curveballs or roadblocks, that an ability, a system to say how can we actually have this be resilient. So I guess the spot that for me when I think about this is coming back to the space of saying, okay, then how do we think differently about our money? Like, what does that look like practically? So, the first place that I start with that is saying, okay, well, it really depends on where you're looking, like what you're getting, your results that you're getting, and this applies to many areas in life, but certainly in money, you're getting where you're going, right? You go where you focus. And sort of the example that I love to share this, you probably had this happen, is you're going down the highway and all of a sudden you hit a traffic jam, and you see like on your maps or whatever, it says, okay, traffic jam for 2 miles, and so you punch your way up along that. And then you get up to the front of that and you realize that the accident's actually in the other lane going the other direction.
Yeah.
But what was stopping this whole flow? What was stopping this whole thing? It's where they were looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so often with money, we do the same thing. We look at what we don't have, or we look at the challenges that are taking place, or we're looking at, oh no, I have this debt, or oh no, I can't make this money, or oh no, right? And so that is just then creating this rewiring within our brains that causes it then to be essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we just end up living it out.
Yeah.
And so for me, the first big shift that I take people through is to say, well, where do I really want to go with money? I call it your financial North Star. Like, what is that place that I'm really want to get to? Like, what do I want to do in this season of life? Where do I want it to go? I was working with a couple recently, and they had paid off like all their household debt and everything like years ago, and they're in their 50s, and they're making decent money, and they're own a business, and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, we have this money coming in, but it's not really going to any place that we're really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? And so we had to rewrite what is their financial North Star, like what is the thing that they really want to see that's going with their money. Because if you don't have that, like, where does your money just sort of goes out to all the places? Because the reason that I think we get in that state with the gnawing is that there are so many good choices for where our money can go and what it can do. But what's hard is saying, how do we actually put the best in there?
Yeah.
But if we can say this is our North Star, and that becomes like our through line for all of our financial decisions, for all the things that we actually want to have take place in our lives.
And it's funny because you just, in giving that description, you threw some words in there. Again, I'm picking up on some of your keywords. Like you even said, we talked about the very opening of this, there's a decision, like, there's a desire. If you have a desire for where that money is going to go or should go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's pieces inside there that, like, start to tie into having that's what starts to develop the clarity, of getting clear.
Yeah,
to be free, right?
Yeah, no, perfect. That's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. It is. That North Star is really about getting clear. And a lot of it is thinking about, what does it mean to be free?
Yeah.
Or what do we need to do in this next season to become free? And once you have that, then you can start to, now you have like this anchor, you have this through line to say, okay, well then if that's true, how does what we're doing right now with our money line up to it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that to me is the big question. If we say this is what really matters to us, the issue is that for so many people, they end up with this, and they're like, well, this is what matters, but this is where my money is actually going, and it's creating this alignment that actually allows the momentum to take place, and allows us to start saying, okay, let's rewire ourselves so that the choices that we're making actually line up to the things that we want the most.
It's perfect. It's like that's why I knew when we first met, and how our relationship has kind of evolved, why you're such a perfect fit as a guest expert inside the Be Free and Clear program. Because, we talk about, for me being a mortgage person, that home ownership is an alignment with your finances, your purpose, and your peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And really that's what you're defining with your North Star, your financial North Star concept. So, man, Brian, it's like, okay, so here's a question, because I will say that, we've talked about like the different types of people that we run into, and you just shared a story. What do you say to the people who are just feeling, I'm going to direct this to maybe a portion of our audience, that they want a different home, or maybe they don't own a home. They're first time home buyers, and they're like, man, like I missed the window. Like this prior to 2020, like I can't afford this anymore. There's an issue of hope, and it doesn't necessarily mean just for a first time home buyer, but there could be. And I'll push this envelope a little bit to say, like, maybe there's even someone that's like always had a desire for a second home, and now they're going like, man, these lakefront properties are running $1 million. Like, and I know there's a big divergence between the two, but it still to me comes back to that gnawing desire that each of us have for something greater and expansion in life. How do you start to address inside of your system that feeling of, we'll call it lost hope?
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it comes back to saying what is just getting like we've been talking about a little bit, is getting clarity or creating awareness. But what you're saying is really real. Like I have a couple down in Texas that I've been working with for the last couple of years. And when they came to me, they had a budget. They were, sort of tracking where their stuff was going. But the thing was, and they're smart people, like he works in IT, she's a PT, like they're making great income, but they weren't creating any progress, and so they were sort of those people that you're describing of like, oh, well, this is just sort of how money is, right? Like, is there hope? Like, are we ever going to get ahead? Like we're making a lot of money, but we're not sending it to the places that really matter. And we're doing what the experts say. We have this budgeting app and the system that we're using. But I think part of it is just opening up and realizing that it's more than just having the right tactics. It is, like we're talking about, adding in the thinking that goes along with it to say, how do I make this a real part of my life?
Yeah.
And I think it's just recognizing that we always do have the power to choose.
Yes.
Part of the framework that I use when I'm teaching people, just around sort of this foundation of whether you like the word budgeting or cash flow planning or whatever you like to use, and budgeting's like can be, I joke, sometimes that can be like a bad word, right? It's like the B word, like it can be a bad word.
For me, it's like outlawed in my household. Like, I'm not using the word budget; it doesn't exist.
Right. But either whatever you want to call it, the reality is that we need something that's going to help us see where are we at and how are we currently wired with our money and what choices are we making.
Yep.
But we need to use it in such a way that it's actually guiding our real life.
Yes.
And so, like, one of the techniques that I use, so I use an acronym called Plan, Track, Pivot to talk about how do we do this cash flow piece or this budgeting piece well. And part of it is the obviously we need a plan. And so if you don't have hope, I think part of it is just saying, do you really have a plan laid out? Because a lot of times you can gain huge clarity just by starting to create a plan and seeing what's going on. But we all know a plan only works so well because, real life happens. So that's why we have to track to say, how's that plan working? And we need to be able to do that in some real time so that we're getting feedback on what's going on. But it leads to the third piece, and this is the piece that most people miss, which is the pivot piece. And pivoting means that it has a mindset behind it. It says that we always have the ability to choose. Whatever's going on, we always have the ability to choose. And so I was actually just texted a client today. She was sort of sharing some of what you're saying of like, man, we have all these things going on and we're not sure how to attack it. And I drove back to the point of we always have the power to choose.
Yeah.
And so part of this is that we can say, oh, well, how could we do this any better? How could we do it differently? Is that part of it goes back to saying, well, what are the things that are blocking or stopping us?
Yeah.
What are the things where, and maybe there's even some, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of low hanging fruit that we can just say, well, if I made a little bit different decision here, it would impact here and here and here. And sometimes those things come along and surprise us. Like I was working with a lawyer down in Florida, and he identified that he was spending a decent amount of money eating out. And we looked at why. Well, I'm working late, right? So it was a thing of like, well, I'm working late, so I'm picking up food. And so do you want to guess the change that he made that shifted how he spent his money on food?
Like, you mean as far as his mindset? What do I think?
Yeah.
Or
just tactically what he did. So this is going to be a little blow your mind.
I don't know. I mean, I think about myself, like my wife and I, and for me, going through some recent health things, thinking that it's inside of the way we thought of going out to eat, right? Like it was an emotional reward for us, and it took a shift inside to say that there was something, a greater plan for us to go like, okay, we're gonna cook these healthy dinners together, and that's our time. That's our emotional escape of date night, the type of thing together. So, but I don't know about the attorney.
That's great, because there is the emotional side, and what's interesting is for him is we just said, well, let's experiment with some stuff, and the thing the change that really mattered, he started getting up 1 hour earlier.
Oh wow, okay.
He got up an hour earlier. He suddenly had more margin to be able to eat breakfast at home. He suddenly, like in that time, he made his lunch, so he didn't need to buy lunch out. Because he was getting into work earlier, he was leaving work earlier. Because he left work earlier, he was doing what you just said, coming home and actually making healthy dinners,
right,
and making it. And suddenly, what happened was, the spending on that plummeted. So it's finding, and a lot of times the secret sauce is finding, like, it's not just like, oh, I have to change my money, but it's finding like, what are the things going on that fit into this puzzle to say, what are my opportunities that I can't see right now?
Yeah, Brian, that is such helpful information. I hope, again, our audience is listening and saying like, oh my gosh, there's some easy adjustments. Cause I often look at it as like leaky buckets, right? Like it's, I looked at kind of almost like the Captain Obvious things, like, well, what can we do to minimize our tax liabilities? What can we do to reduce our, unnecessary insurance costs or some of the expenses? Not from a scrimp and save attitude, because you and I both know that, or both agree, I guess, that scrimp and save really comes from a position of scarcity, and I don't think either one of us really we don't promote that kind of mentality.
Yeah, for sure.
But for the financial controls and awareness. But it's so interesting. That is so cool to think about, like, hey, just shifting. It isn't even really about money. It's about like, well, let's just get up an hour earlier, create some more space, in our life. And not only that, maybe now he has, not only eating at home or not eating up, but maybe he's got some time for, a short reading, or, in my case, I like to do some breath work in the morning, and some of those things can get introduced to his life. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, and it all tied together as part of his health journey. It was part of it. It ties in holistically. And for me, that's one of the big keys is when we say, oh, well, there's this easy way to look, and we can say, well, I'm just not good with money. But if we start to peel it back and say, well, what are the pieces of this, right, that I could change, right? So how can I actually become the master and commander of my money? We start to find these opportunities that we couldn't see before.
Yes.
And so let me hit you with one more. So another technique that I teach people is, so you can, right, because you can have this great plan, you can be tracking it, you can be pivoting, but what really matters is that point of decision. Is when you're standing there and you're saying, do I buy or not buy? Do I go or not go? How do you rewire what's going on? Because so often in those spaces, we're just on autopilot. We're just doing whatever is wired into our brains of this is what we've always done. So I had one of my clients. She's a scientist, lives in the Ann Arbor area. Super smart, managing multiple labs, quality side of labs around the country. But for her, what we identified as she created the PTP financial feedback loop, so she could see this. Now we're just getting data on ourselves. That's the way I like to look at it, right? A budget isn't to restrict us, it's to get data on what's going on so that we can be more intentional with the choices that we're making. And so we're looking at that, and she identified that, and one of the places that she just spends on without thinking about it is her kids. If it was for her kids, boom, she just spent on it. And so I asked, I'm like, well, how do you spend on it? And she's like, well, I use my credit card, right? I pull this thing out of my wallet, boom. And so what we did is we said, okay, well, let's try this, because how do we disrupt that? So what I'm really describing is it's wired into it, right? There's a wiring that's taking place there. And so if we want something different, we have to find ways to disrupt ourselves, to wire ourselves differently. And so I have the method that I teach called the DQD method. It stands for disrupt, question, and decide. And so disrupt. So what do we have to do for her? This was a deeply ingrained one. Like, this was really, really deep. And so because it was just automatic. And so we said, well, how are we going to disrupt it? Well, she said, well, since I buy on this credit card. So I said, okay, how about we try this? Let's take your card. We're going to put it into a baggie and then we're going to put that into your purse. So now when you pull it out, you have to do some additional actions or motions, right? Creating a disruption. And so the second part then was a question. So we put a sticky note on the card in the baggie with two questions, and I guess the big question is, two questions, or does this help me meet my goals, or does this help me go to my North Star, would be another way to say that. And is this really, and for her, since this was about her kids, is this what's best for my kids?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. Because here's the thing, I guess that a little bit of context is that she was doing this for her kids every month to survive the month. She was getting a pay advance.
Wow.
And so there was this funky dichotomy of, well, I'm having to take a pay advance, but I'm spending this money on my kids. What's really best for my kids?
Yeah.
And so by asking that question, what's really best for my kids, it caused her to say, okay, well, yeah, what is really best for my kids? Yeah. And so then she had the ability to do that last D of saying, okay, well, now I'm going to actually make a decision that isn't on autopilot. I'm going to make a very conscious, intentional choice aligned with what's most important to me, my North Star, my kids, and asking that question to disrupt my normal, to say, what do I really need to do?
Yeah.
And, as she did that and went along this path, suddenly she flipped from getting a pay advance every month to telling me, like, wow, I never realized how much money I made. And being able to then, like you were talking about, right? Talking about being free and clear, of being able to move from the space where when she gets her paycheck, she's always having to send a piece of it to the past, to her past self who had to take that, and instead being able to actually take and put that into the places that she really wanted to go to.
Yep. Well, and what you are doing for her is so incredible, because it's easy. I think I'm trying to speak from myself, but also, thinking about all of us as humanity. I got to believe this statement's going to be true, is that who doesn't want the best for their kids? Who doesn't want to give them more, right? Who doesn't want to do something for their family or a loved one? And so you made, you took the moment of saying, like, is this a pattern, or is this something that really down, like, in our heart is true form? So it's cool too, because I loved it. Spoken like a true engineer, like data and a process tied into something emotional. So hey, Brian, the stuff you're putting out there is amazing. I try to keep these episodes to a minimal time for folks so they can get on with their lives, make it be effective. But I got to ask this question before we wrap up. I think this is huge, because you are very methodical. You're giving people a process to go through so they can actually see. I call it, once you spark hope, then that drives faith. Once you have faith, all you have to do is trust. And then that trust develops into belief, and then the belief ends up being knowing, because you will end up seeing it. So you are doing that with your processes. And what I want to ask is, because you are, you are very analytical, and you've done all these structured things. I've got to ask this question of, how do you feel? How does it feel now knowing that you've lived through what you've coached you've got your house paid off, you've positioned yourself financially, and beyond all those, we could call those material type things, but you are living with your purpose. What does that feel like?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, for me, it is the definition of, I guess, I use the definition thrive with money, business name, very, very intentionally. I know, probably not a shock, but the word thrive, what is it? If you look at the definition, it says, flourishing, growing, prospering.
Oh,
And for me, that's, I guess for me, that's the space that I feel like God has brought me into, of just being able to really step into who I was created to be. And when you're living in that space, things aren't as scary. Like when you're living in the space that you're called to, the things that looked big and huge suddenly become much smaller. And you're like, okay, I'm going to trust that since you brought me here, I'm going to be able to go to there. So yeah, it's very powerful. But I do want to, I guess, segue really quick back of, yes, what I teach is a system, right? Because I think that's what we lack is a system, but feelings are an integral part of that system.
yeah.
Because even in the tracking, one of the things that I challenge people to do when they track their money is see how it feels when they track it. Because even as we track our money, like if we take a transaction that's popped through and we put it into a category and we see that category change, oftentimes we can learn more by listening to our feelings than we can listening to our analytics.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it does all fit together, because yes, the DQD is powerful, but there's so many other things that we need that also address the emotional states, which I know we don't have time to delve into, but I have a whole methodology around soundtracks that really talk about how do we change like our beliefs around what we're doing.
Yeah, but you've got a point, because all those tie together, right? Because we know from the loops, right, that if we're feeling something, it's because it's part of the loop of what we believed that created a thought that drove that feeling. The feeling then created an action or a reaction. And then that, of course, reinforced the initial belief. So we're in this loop. And you're taking them through a process that does bring into feelings, because it is part of the whole system, right? So it's holistic. So
right, it is holistic. Yeah, because to me, when we think about how do we make some of these big decisions, it's got to come back to, what does the data say? What does the math say? What does the emotion say? And we only make really good decisions when we put the two of those things together.
Yeah.
And so it does all tie together, and you have to have both sides of it. Money isn't just math. Money is also emotion and belief and how we think about it. And that's where, the system that I've created is it's about being able to have both, right? It's saying, let me get some data so I can see, what do I actually believe? So maybe I can, if I want to pick those beliefs, I can change the belief into a different belief, which then drives a difference in the math, which then helps me believe more, which then gets me onto this. Instead of this being a hamster wheel, it's a momentum wheel. And suddenly now we are cranking away, and the things that we thought weren't possible in the past suddenly start to become possible in our future, because we're different people as a result of the process.
I actually just wrote that down. The momentum wheel. It's so much inside of our language and our wording, right? So that's here. Momentum wheel. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Right. Yeah.
Here we go. Hey, I want to throw this up there. It's thrivewithmoney.com with Brian Johnson. If you've got questions and you want to reach out to Brian, you can find him here. Brian, what a pleasure it's been spending more time with you. I look forward to the great things we can do by coupling our strategies for folks.
Absolutely.
And any closing comments, any words of wisdom that you would throw out if you had a last word of advice, like this was this was it. You had one thing to share. What would it be with our audience?
I guess I want to go back to the people that you're talking to, the people who are like saying how to like that, either have that gnawing feeling or they're wrestling with, how can I have hope? Is that when you start to be able to see things differently, when you can change the way you're looking and thinking about it, a whole new world opens up to you.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
I've seen it over and over and over. And it was part of our story. And it's been part of the story of every person I've worked with over the last 5+ years of the, they're in this spot, and then suddenly this shifts, and new opportunities and new ways of doing things and new things come in that we've never even thought of. So I can guarantee anybody who's feeling like, oh, I'm just not sure, that there's an opportunity in front of you. It's just a matter of being able to position yourself to see it. And once you can see it, then we can adjust it and change and get into a space where we can go from just sort of getting by and being here into a space of where we're really thriving and everything's working together, and we have that we're riding that momentum wheel, to use your new favorite phrase.
Yeah, great way to wrap it up. So Brian, thank you so much again for being with us. I appreciate it. Look forward to spending more time in the future with you.
Awesome. Thanks, John.